A random man tried to assault my girlfriend at a party, and I defended her, but the cops arrested me for assaulting him. About a year ago, my girlfriend Sarah and I attended a party. A few hours into it, we snuck off into an empty closet room to make out. In the middle of our makeout session, I went to the bathroom, and on my way back, I heard her scream. I rushed in and saw some guy trying to assault her while she was pushing him off. I punched the guy from behind and wailed on him hard, stopping only when he was out cold. Sarah and I left the party, and I thought that was the end of it. But the next day, the police showed up at my door and put me in handcuffs, telling me I was being charged with aggravated assault. I tried my best to explain what had actually happened, but they wouldn't listen. They took me away, and once I was in jail, I called Sarah and explained the situation. Long story short, she bailed me out, but the legal process dragged on for months. In the end, the court ruled based on the testimonies of the guy's friends who were also at the party, who painted me as the aggressor. Sarah explaining what had happened and how she was assaulted meant nothing to them, apparently. In the end, I was sentenced to 7 months in jail. In jail, the days were monotonous. The same walls, the same routines. It felt like time had become a loop. I tried to read books to pass the time, but most of the books were beat up and missing pages. My mind kept turning to how Sarah would view me after this, and whether I could still provide her with the life she deserved. I hoped that I could find a job after this, and that Sarah would wait for me. I felt hopeless until the first visit happened. When I walked into the visitation room, I felt a bit lighter than usual. Seeing Sarah there felt like seeing the first flowers of spring after a really long, cold winter. I was almost surprised to see her there. I had tried not to get my hopes up about her visiting, so I wouldn't be let down if she couldn't come. Sarah and I talked about small things first, like the book she was reading and a movie she had seen the previous week, but she seemed a bit off. I noticed she was talking rather quickly and wasn't looking me in the eye. It felt like her body was there physically, but her mind was elsewhere. I asked her if everything was okay, and she said she'd been feeling overwhelmed lately. When I asked her about what exactly, she replied that it had been a lot handling everything on her own. I reassured her that after I got out, I would do everything in my power to take the load off her completely. But she told me that I just didn't understand. I questioned her about what she meant, but she refused to give me an answer. She visited me regularly throughout the 7 months I was there, but every single time she wouldn't tell me why she was so overwhelmed. It wasn't just because I was in jail. Her visits were what kept me going every day in jail. She was my only connection to the outside world, and then the day of my release finally came. The morning sun shined a little brighter that day, and the air was crisp. I stood at the gates of the facility, threw my backpack over my shoulder, and as the gates swung open, I saw Sarah pulling up. I ran to the car. She looked as beautiful as ever. When I got to the car, I pulled her out, hugged her, and kissed her repeatedly. She laughed and kissed me back. I told her how much I missed her, and she returned the love. We got in the car and headed home. That's when I asked her if I could come over to her mom's house for something to eat. I barely ate in jail because the food was bland and made my insides feel terrible. I was beyond excited to get something to eat from her mom's home, especially since I never got home-cooked meals growing up. My family barely tolerated me, and when I moved out, I never looked back. Sarah said, "Why don't we just stop by a fast food place on the way home?" I hadn't worked in over 7 months, and I didn't have much savings before I went to jail. I hated to make her come pick me up and pay for my food, especially when her mom's cornbread was the best in town. I told her I was craving a home-cooked meal, and she said she'd cook for me. It felt like she was avoiding the question completely. I asked her if everything was all right, and she told me that everything was fine. "Then why can't we visit your mom's house?" I asked her. She took a deep breath and told me that we needed to talk about something. I never liked the sound of those words. I told her that we could talk, and she told me that ever since I got the charge, her family had told her she needed to choose between them or me. I asked her why that was even an option. She said it was because they saw me as a violent person since the court ruled that she was lying about what had happened at the party. I could see the hurt in her eyes as she told me this. I asked her if she told them what really happened, and she said she did. I couldn't understand why they would listen to a judge who wasn't there for the incident over their own daughter. They said that I wasn't protecting her and that I was probably too intoxicated and started the fight. I asked her what she did after finding all of this out, and she said that she chose me and broke down crying. This was the reason she had been visiting me all these months. We pulled over, and she continued to tell me everything. I could tell she'd been holding this in for months, and it all came out at once, like someone had broken a dam. She went on to say that she had been living on her own for months, trying to make ends meet. I asked her why she didn't tell me this sooner, and she said that she couldn't because I was in jail at the time, and I needed to focus on getting through it. Having more to deal with was not what I needed. I agreed with her. There wasn't much I could do in jail but worry about her. But I'm here now, and I knew I would make good on my promise to her. I hugged her tight and told her that everything would be okay. I told her to get in the passenger seat to calm down, and I drove us to her place. A few months later, Sarah and I were having a game night with just the two of us. We were playing Uno, which was her family's favorite game. They used to play it all night and into the early morning on some weekends. I laid a draw of 4 on her, and she seemed pretty bummed. Not the usual reaction you'd see if someone had to pick up cards. She looked sad, like she was on the verge of tears. I tried to joke with her and said, "Honey, I know I'm kicking your butt right now, but you don't have to cry." She looked at me, and a single tear fell down her cheek. I immediately put the cards down and went to hold her. I asked her what was wrong, and she said that she just really missed her family. She said that I was enough for her, but she'd never gone this long without speaking to her family, and playing the game made her miss them more. I asked her if she wanted to try to reach out to them again to rebuild that relationship. But she said she didn't know if they would talk to her, and that she just wanted them to believe her. I said that she wouldn't know if she didn't try, but she felt that the trust between them was completely shattered. Getting it back to how it was before would take time, and I recognized that. When I asked her if she would be open to meeting up with them to talk about it, she said she would like that. I then went to the kitchen to get her favorite ice cream. She looked at me and smiled, tears still in her eyes. We sat in the living room, talking and eating ice cream until we went to bed. The next day I tried to contact her dad, but he didn't pick up the first time. I assumed he was possibly still at work, so I called her mom. She answered and asked who it was. When I told her who I was, she hung up immediately, so I called back and asked her for 30 seconds of her time. She told me to make it quick, and I told her how Sarah had been feeling these past few months and how she wanted a relationship with them again. She said that if I was a part of it, they wanted nothing to do with us. She called me a crazy, abusive man and said how afraid she was to be in the same room as me. I didn't defend myself. Instead, I told her that I wouldn't have to be involved. This was for Sarah. I reminded her that we both loved Sarah and both wanted to see her happy, and I knew that this would make her happy. She agreed only because she missed her little girl, and that was when I suggested they meet in the park in broad daylight, and I wouldn't be anywhere around if she didn't want me to be. She said she would meet with both of us only because it was a public location with witnesses, but added, "You wouldn't know anything about that, would you?" Her words hurt a bit, but I knew this was for Sarah, so it made it worth it. We agreed on a date and time, then I rushed off the phone to tell Sarah the good news. When she picked up, she seemed a bit nervous and told me that she didn't know what she would say. I told her that it would come to her in the moment and to not stress it. On the day of the meetup, Madison looked like she was sweating bullets. She kept her eyes fixed outside the window most of the time and didn't talk much. When we got there, I told her that whichever way it went, she would be okay. She nodded, and we walked over to a table where we met her mom. She greeted us both, one more excited than the other, and we sat down to eat lunch. She started off by asking what really happened that night, and I explained that it was just an annual summer bash hosted by our friend. We went to it every year, and when I got there, some guy approached Sarah and tried to hit on her. I sent him on his way, and later on, when Sarah and I were in a closet room alone having a deep chat, though I wasn't about to tell her mother what we were actually doing, I went to the bathroom. When I got back, I saw the same guy from earlier, clearly trying to assault her. I hit him pretty hard. We left the party after informing the host of what had happened, but the next day, the cops showed up and arrested me. Of course, as luck would have it, the host was moving countries in a week and couldn't testify in court. After I said this, Sarah's mother asked her if it was true, and Sarah agreed, saying that she thanked God I was there that night. Her mom still felt like I was violent. And that's when Sarah told her mom that the guy she should be afraid of was the one from the night of the incident. He didn't take no for an answer, and that's when I stepped in and protected her. She kept telling her over and over how I didn't start the fight and how I only pushed the guy off of her. The table fell quiet. Her mom saw how much it had been eating away at Sarah. and she knew that Sarah was telling the truth. She saw how heartbroken Sarah was, and her mom started apologizing. She placed her hand over her mouth and began to cry. She said to herself, "My baby, my poor baby." She apologized to me too. She said she never should have listened to the people around her, telling her that I was dangerous, and felt so ashamed that she couldn't be a safe space for her daughter. She said how guilty she felt for making Sarah support herself alone all these months, and that the no contact had affected her as well. She tried to console Sarah, but Sarah pushed her off. Her mom said she understood, given everything she'd been through. She then asked if we could forgive her and start over. She looked at me for approval, but I told her it would be ultimately up to Sarah. Sarah, still crying, said that she would need time to forgive her for the past year, but she was willing to try to fix the relationship between them. We left the park and talked about the conversation on the car ride home. Several months after the park meeting, I could feel the change in Sarah's family dynamic. We went over to her house, and I could smell the delicious cornbread from the door. After we ate, her dad pulled out a deck of Uno cards and asked if we were down for a game. We hadn't played since before I went to jail. We teased and laughed with each other, but I could see that Sarah was still walking on eggshells around her family. I could see how hard it was to forgive and forget while being in the presence of the people who almost made her homeless and left her out to dry. The trust in her parents had been lost, but she was on the road to having a cordial relationship with them. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed our stories and would like to hear more, please consider subscribing to our channel. Your support helps us continue bringing you captivating tales and new content every week. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. We appreciate every one of you for being a part of our storytelling journey.